Buenas tardes, mi gente. My name is Jorge Antonio Renaud, and I am recording this from Seguin, Texas. I'd like to thank the Virginia C. Piper Center for Creative Writing, James Garcia, and Belinda Costa with Canto Mundo for inviting me. I struggled with the idea about whether or not to refer to the existential threats to our country and to our people, to the underlying motive of this event. As a poet, I decided to let my poetry speak to that. I'll be doing 2 poems. The first was written as part of a campaign to do away with the exception to the 13th Amendment, which allows for individuals convicted of felonies in this country to be enslaved, and which is the basis for prison slavery and labor. If you're interested in joining that struggle, please visit us at intheexception.com. The second poem was written during the pandemic when our pleas to Texas Governor Greg Abbott to release humans who were dying of COVID were ignored. Both poems are from my upcoming collection, The Restlessness of Bound Wrists, to be published in May of this year by Infrarrealista Review, which focuses on works of Texas writers. And I want to give a shout out to Cloud Cardona, to Juanilla Sueños, and to Amber, Las Mera Meras, at that review. Iron to the ages, with apologies to Assata. Imagine, for one moment, the creak of wood slipping to the sea as generations tremble during the Middle Passage, manacled left leg to right, father to son, mother to child. Salt from the leaping waves seeping to the leaking decks to water their weeping skin, and wrapped around the wooden spars the bilboes make their music, keeping time to the moans of those abandoned by gods and grace alike. Invented 12 centuries before they nailed a crown of thorns to the forehead of he whose coming was promised to save the world, iron inevitably would be used for this. No better use imagined than to be molded into knife or hammered into sword, shaped into chain, fitted around necks, tightened around ankles, link to link, captive to captive, slave to slave. Among all metals in the crust of the earth, iron trails only aluminum, that soft weakling. And woven into the tip of otherwise forgetful whips, iron flays the skin in remarkably even lines, leaving tiny pieces of itself in the limbs of those it has kissed, ferrous filaments snuggling into their scars. Iron was never meant to be traded for the flesh of those it squeezed. The coins clanking onto the planks of commerce were much shinier, glittery in the southern sun as the living were herded onto the trading blocks. Iron from the rib of a spatulus forcing their teeth apart, shoved under their tongues to gauge their worth. And it was iron that was calibrated to weigh the more precious commodities, copper on one side of the scale, flesh on the other. Iron has a Slavic strength. Iron has a Portuguese implacability. Iron has a British determination. Iron has a Spanish cruelty. Iron has an American flair. Iron is the cups stacked after the slaves sipped the ration and trudged back to the fields, bowls of cotton blanketing the horizon. Iron is the pots scrubbed and scoured after the daily stew, hot and sour, sits tightly in their throats. Iron is the blade of the grubbing hoe, gripped by hands that have no memory of softness. Iron is the axe, hefted and swung with intent to build nothing they will ever call their own. Iron is a bullet. Iron is a gun. Iron is the cage. At 2,786 degrees Fahrenheit, iron begins to smolder. And that is a fever pitch we must attain if we are to survive centuries of subjugation. At 2,788 degrees, iron begins to boil, and that is a temperature we must sustain if we are to see our liberation. At 2,800 degrees, iron liquefies and begins to flame and run, and that is a blaze we must light if we are to arrive at our true emancipation. Imagine, for a moment, the 2,347,800 126 humans in American cages, nourishing their individual flames. Every iron cage boiling, melting, running into rivulets, doubling into tributaries, a mad downward slide into the sea to sizzle and hiss into the shape of the ships that brought the iron makers here. Imagine a fleet, a flotilla, an armada of iron yanked into the waves by the howling spirits of all who have been manacled and whipped and caged. Imagine, imagine, because all we have to lose is our chains. Death in the name of Abbott. Squeaky clean and sanctified is not a concept associated with sinks and toilets occupied by groups. Two squatting over here, three spitting into that rust-encrusted bowl over there, amplified by a rush of musky, smelling like last week freaks fighting for the last showerhead and passing around a piece of lye so greasy with fur razored off a dozen faces. Distance is unattainable. When penance demands not personal examination or a transformation of systems, but a set number of seconds stacked upon minutes, scratched on concrete walls, and humans lying on racks after racks in cement-lined packing crates. And so it's no surprise that death in the name of Abbott is but a sneeze away. Sniffles sneaking from cell to cell, coughs echoing down the morbid runs, bodies toe-tagged and dragged down the hallways, explained with a dismissive wag of the administrative tongue as to why they declined to release the barely breathing into the less desperate, lonely confines of love and life outside the wire, because that could be unpalatable for the politically inclined. So let them die. Just let them all die. Again, coming to you from Seguin, Texas, this is Jorge Antonio Renaud and Cloud Cordona. Thank you all, Arizona. Good night.